You know, a question I get a lot this time of year is, can we or should we have a fence built in the wintertime? And the answer is, it depends. But what does it depend on? Well, let's get into it. The first thing is, where in the country do you live? If you're in the southern half of the United States, Florida, Georgia, Southern California, there's likely no reason the fence can't be built in the wintertime. It doesn't get nearly cold enough to have any impact either on the ground that we're digging in or the concrete if that's what we're using to install the fence. Wintertime is a lot like summertime in terms of fence production. Now, if you're in the northern states, that doesn't mean that you necessarily can't have a fence built. It's just going to require a little bit more thinking, which leads us into the second part of the it depends. And that is, what type of project are we talking about? Is it a commercial project or a residential? The reason this matters is because commercial projects typically are a bit larger and there's a bit more room to bring in larger equipment. So even in the northern United States, if it's a commercial project, likely the fencing contractor can bring on a piece of equipment large enough to drill through the frozen ground. It's a lot like digging through rock. Sometimes, arguably, it's a little bit easier. Now, if it's a residential project, the job site's a bit smaller and it's going to be a bit harder to bring large enough equipment in that has enough horsepower and torque to really dig through that frozen dirt. The third factor is going to depend on how the fence is being installed, meaning, are we digging a hole and filling it with concrete? Or are we driving the post? There's a lot of contractors here in the United States, and we're one of them, that will still drill holes and set concrete using the concreted post to build a fence. And when we're talking about concreted post, the temperature really comes into play in that concrete doesn't want to cure in the same rate top to bottom in a colder environment than it does in a warmer environment. If you think about it, the deeper you go, the warmer the earth gets, the more of an insulator it is. And what you don't want is concrete that seems firm, that's not entirely cured. Now, there's ways to get around this. Obviously, you can add calcium chloride to the water that you're mixing with the concrete. It heats the whole batch up and makes it set a lot faster also. But when we're talking about just in general, standard concrete mixes, once the temperature gets below a certain point, it's going to be difficult to build that fence with concrete, knowing that from top to bottom of the hole, the concrete's going to cure at a different pace. Now, in contrast, the contractors I talked to in the northern United States that are able to drive the fence post are able to build fence throughout the wintertime. They're not worried about the frost depth because they're typically using equipment that can drive post through rock. Again, driving through frozen ground, arguably a little bit easier than driving through solid rock, but also they're not worried about the moisture content of the concrete freezing or affecting the concrete curing itself. Like I said, a lot of the contractors that use driven post build fence all winter long, even the contractors in Chicago and in other parts of the northern United States. So how the fence is being installed also plays a large role in how the fence is being built. Now, beyond the question, can you have a fence built in the wintertime, is also the question you should be asking, should you have a fence built in the wintertime? Arguably, I would suggest winter is the best time of having the fence built. And here's a few reasons. First is lead time. In the summertime, everyone's out in their yard. They're thinking about having that fence replaced. They're having graduations or weddings, or for whatever reason, the fence needs to be replaced, and it needs to be replaced quickly. Using our company as an example, in the summertime, lead times can range from 8 to 12 weeks out. Now, in the wintertime, people are less likely to be in their yards. The fence just isn't top of mind, and we see our lead times come down to 4 to 6 weeks out. So we can get to a fence project quite a bit sooner in the wintertime than we can in the summertime. Now, the second consideration is cost. Oftentimes, fence will cost less in the wintertime than it does in the summertime. Few factors in this. One is that manufacturers manufacture fence all year round. And if the demand is waning for that fence, the price usually follows it. The manufacturers will offer discounts for winter buys in order to keep their production moving. And a lot of times you see contractors that capture that saving from the manufacturers and pass it straight on to the customers, reducing the cost of that project. Also, sometimes contractors, feeling the pinch of not having as much work as they would like, also start offering discounts to try to stir up a little bit of business. So when you combine the manufacturer's discounts with the contractor's discounts, you could save a bundle installing your fence in the wintertime. The third consideration is wintertime is actually the best time to install a fence when it comes to installing it around landscaping. A lot of times you see the landscaping go dormant for the wintertime. They'll drop their leaves. They'll often become much hardier to resist the winter weather. So that if you're bringing equipment in and around them, one, you can typically get your fence closer if they've dropped their foliage, but two, equipment brushing up against or working around the landscaping likely won't have as much of an impact, if at all, because, like I say, the landscaping is dormant. Also, the ground is typically a bit firmer if you live in a climate where the ground does freeze, so less likely to, say, cause ruts in the yard bringing equipment in and out. Our guys love building fence in the wintertime for just this reason. It's a lot easier to get in and out without having to take time to repair whatever disturbance in the landscape was caused by building the fence. So, like I say, can you build fence in the wintertime? It depends, but more than likely the answer is yes. And should you build a fence in the wintertime? I think it's absolutely the best time to build a fence. If you have any more questions, drop them in the comments below. I always love engaging with you guys in the comments section. For now, Joe Everest, the fence expert, reminding you that good fences make good neighbors, and I'll catch you next time.